Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your boy, Pastor Jamel, and it is time for the Word. Now, we are in day three of a six-part series titled The Purpose of Pain. Every day, we talk about a different purpose of pain as it relates to what we experience as we go through life. So, with that being said, let's jump right into day three and our third P for the purpose of pain. The third P for the purpose of pain is that pain prepares through a process. Again, pain prepares through a process. So, yesterday we talked about the fact that some of the pain that we experience in life is self imposed, it's self inflicted. We experience this pain because of our choices, our decisions, things that we've done, our actions or our inactions. But some of us have had a glimpse of what God has said is in store for us. Maybe you've already seen what the business is supposed to look like. You've already seen what the family that you're going to have is going to look like. You've already seen the impact that your organization is going to have on the world. But when you look around, your experiences aren't matching what God has showed you. The people that are around you aren't helping you, they're hurting you or they're betraying you, and things aren't going the way that you thought they should according to what God showed you. And it causes you a great deal of pain. So today we're going to talk about a story in the Bible. We're going to talk about the story of Joseph's dream. Now, this is a very familiar story in the Bible, but we're not going to put any Bible verses up today because while most Bible stories are just a couple of verses long, the story of Joseph's dream spans from Genesis chapter 37 all the way to the end of the book of Genesis in Genesis chapter 50. So there's really a lot going on in this particular story, but I'm going to give a really brief kind of synopsis of the story, and then I want to pull out a couple of things that this story shows us about how pain prepares through a process. So, the story of Joseph. Joseph is the son of Israel, formerly known as Jacob. Now, Joseph has a ton of brothers, but out of all of his brothers, he is clearly Israel's favorite. As a matter of fact, Israel gave Joseph a coat of many colors. The Bible says that it's a finely ornamented coat. Essentially, while buying all of his other kids Adidas, he bought Joseph some Gucci. And so his brothers are very jealous of him because of this. Beyond being jealous because he's obviously dad's favorite, um, Joseph is also a bit of a snitch. If his brothers are doing something that they have no business doing or they're not doing the right thing, Joseph will let Israel know. And because of this, they hate him even the more. So let's talk about Joseph's dream. Joseph actually had two dreams that he shared with his family. The first dream that he shared only with his brothers, essentially, this is his dream. This isn't the exact dream, but this is essentially what his dream meant. He dreamed that his brothers would have to bow down to him. In his second dream, he dreamed that his mother, his father, and his brothers would have to bow down to him. So, of course, this infuriated his brothers. They hated him even the more. And so they actually plotted to kill him. But they were talked out of that, luckily, and instead they decided to sell Joseph into slavery. So they sold him into slavery, took his finely ornamented robe that dad gave him, and smeared it with some blood from a sheep, and then took it back to the father and told Israel, looks like your son got killed by a wild animal. So Joseph now is sold into slavery, but while in slavery, Joseph continues to believe God's word and do the best that he can in that season. And so he gains favor with the slave master. So much so that at some point the slave master makes Joseph ruler over all of the land, second only to himself. And so the slave master's wife begins to take a look at Joseph, thinks he looks good, whatever your depiction of that is in your mind, and wants him. And essentially asks Joseph to sleep with her. Joseph tells her, the slave master has been great to me. He has given me everything that he has, with the exception of you. How can I do that to somebody who's been so great to me? I'm not going to do it. She grabs his coat and basically says, oh, you gonna give me some. He takes off his coat, runs out. All right. So once she has the coat, she screams and basically says that he attempted to take it from her. This, of course, enrages the slave master, who has him thrown into prison. So now Joseph is in prison, and again, he still continues to believe God's word and does the best that he can in that phase of his life. And he begins to gain favor by interpreting dreams for some individuals that are in prison. Word of this gets to the ruler of Egypt, the king of Egypt. And so the king has a dream that no one else can interpret. And then they tell him about Joseph. So Joseph comes to the king and interprets the king's dream. The king is so pleased that he makes Joseph second in command, ruler of all of Egypt. He says the only difference between me as king and you is I have the throne, but nothing will happen in Egypt unless you say that it happens. So Joseph is over all of Egypt. Now, this is the dream that he interpreted for the king. Essentially, the dream is that we're going to have 7 years of abundance of crops and food, followed by 7 years of drought and famine. So we really need to prepare for the 7 years of drought and famine during the 7 years of abundance. Well, once the 7 years of famine comes and strikes the land, Joseph's family begins to starve. And they're so hungry that Israel tells some of the brothers to go and get some food from Egypt, because I heard that they started stockpiling food. So go to Egypt, get some food. And so, of course, when you go to Egypt, you have to go to who runs Egypt. Who is that? It's Joseph. But Joseph actually gives them the food, ultimately forgives them, and essentially they all live happily ever after. That is the gist. I really would recommend that you take some time, go to Genesis chapter 37, read through Genesis chapter 50. I believe that the reason that this is one of the longest stories from kind of a page standpoint and a chapter standpoint in the Bible is because there's a lot to see in this story. But there are a couple of things I want to pull out for us right now in the story of Joseph. So here's the first thing. Joseph was ordained and called before he was ever born. If you go back to Genesis chapter 30, you'll see that Rachel, who was Israel, back then called Jacob, was Jacob's wife. And out of all of his wives, Rachel was the wife that was barren. She could not have children. And so all of the other wives were having children for Jacob, but Rachel couldn't. And she anguished over this. I mean, some of the wives were having kid after kid after kid, and she could not have a child. And she begged God for a child, and God answered her prayer because he saw how much pain she was in, and he also saw that she was jealous of the other wives that were able to give Jacob children. And so he granted her a child, which was Joseph, that ultimately became Israel's favorite. Now, here's the interesting thing here. Rachel was jealous of the other wives. And then finally, she had one kid. All of these other wives have multiple kids. At the time, Rachel has one kid. And all of the children of the other wives are jealous of Joseph. See, some of the things that we are experiencing in our life is that God is working something through a bloodline, through a lineage. So some of the pain that we are experiencing is actually coming from a different generation. Now, we've all heard about generational curses. We've all heard of it. We talk about it all the time, but some people are so focused on the negative, they don't see the positive. There is a such thing as generational blessings. God blessed Rachel with a child, blessed that child to be the favorite, and then ultimately blessed that child to be the head and the ruler of Egypt. And that continued on. Some of the pain that we experience isn't because we are horrible individuals. It isn't because God hates us and he's after us. Some of the pain that we're experiencing is the process of a generational blessing. We are being prepared through a process for what God ultimately has for your bloodline. That's number one. Number two, Joseph had a victor mentality as opposed to a victim mentality. Now, some of us have experienced pain, and I do not mean to diminish your pain. I do not mean to diminish your experiences. What you went through, what happened to you, it is valid. The pain that you feel is valid. But here is the difference. What is your perception about the purpose of that pain? Because if you have a victim mentality, you focus so much on the offense that you can't see God working the process and the preparation. Here's what Joseph did. Joseph was sold into slavery, so he was betrayed by those who were his blood, betrayed by those who were closest to him. He didn't tell his friends about his dream. He didn't tell anyone at the market about the dream, or some farmer or some shepherd. He told his brothers, and they betrayed him. They stabbed him in the back and ultimately sold him into slavery. If Joseph said that the only thing that I can focus on is I can't believe they would do that to me. Those were my brothers. They never should have treated me like that. They never should have done that to me. I've been so wronged. I can't stop focusing on the offense. He never would have been able to see I'm being prepared through the process. See, what Joseph taught us in this story is do not focus on the beginning. Focus on the end. So this is what happened. God gave Joseph a dream, but then there was an offense against him. He was essentially betrayed. Joseph, rather than focusing on the offense, never lost sight of God's word. God told me and gave me this dream. So every place that I go, I'm not going to be bitter. I'm going to be better. So yes, I'm sold into slavery. Bitter would have me angry and upset and not doing a great job. Better gained me favor in front of the slave master. Yes, I was wrongfully accused for trying to sleep with my slave master's wife. Bitter would have had me in prison doing absolutely nothing, and I don't care. I forget this whole thing. Better has me using what God gave me and then moving up. And that ultimately got him to the position that he needed to be. See, in the process, Joseph never stopped using God's gift to him, which was the ability to dream and to interpret dreams. How many of us have experienced pain and we've refused to use God's gift? Because of something that happened to you, you won't draw anymore. Because of something that happened to you, you've refused to sing for the last 10 years. Because of something that happened to you, you'll never set foot in church ever again. What happened is the pain caused you to lose sight of the gift that God gave you and the preparation and the process. So Joseph shows us here that if you focus on God's word and if you continue to do your best and not be bitter, but be better, that it will ultimately lead to the end result. The last part is the process. How do we know that this is a process? Why do we know it's a process? Joseph received his dream in Genesis chapter 37, verse 2. In that verse, it says that Joseph was 17 years old when he had the dream. Later in Genesis chapter 41, verse 46, which is several years later, we find out that when Joseph becomes second only to the king of Egypt, to the Pharaoh of Egypt, we find out that he's 30 years old. 13 years have passed between what God said and it actually coming to pass. But there was a process. Everything that happened to Joseph in that process prepared him for where he was ultimately going to be. I know that we live in this phase. We live in this time where uh, things happen so instantly. I mean, you can throw your food in the microwave and in 2 minutes you can have your food. You can call Uber Eats and a meal that would take you 2 hours to cook can be at your doorstep in 20 minutes. You can Google anything that you don't know and have an answer in seconds. We want things so instantaneously. But this is the thing I need us all to understand. You got to look at this from a higher perspective. God exists in a realm outside of time, space, and matter. God does not exist in the realm of the temporal. So when God says you are going to be financially wealthy, he already sees that your bank account is full of money. When God says that you are going to be a powerful CEO, God already sees your company and your hundreds to thousands of employees. It's already happened there. But in the realm that we live in, the realm of the temporal, remember that the first thing that God created in the Bible was time. Because the Bible in Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But God exists outside of time. So what do you mean in the beginning? There was no beginning because God is not linear. God is all. So God had to create time so that he could put us into time. So God created time. So when God tells us something, we have to be prepared through a process between when God tells us and when it comes to pass. But if you believe God's word more than believing your situation, your circumstances, your upbringing, or anything that's happening around you right now, it will come to pass. Joseph showed us very clearly not to be bitter, but to be better. And he showed us that pain prepares us through a process. If this message has blessed you or touched you in any way, if you would please like and share the video with somebody that maybe needs to hear it. I'm not speaking for everybody in the world, but somebody needs to hear this message that you were ordained from birth, that there is a generational blessing in your bloodline, that you have to continue to do and use your gift through the process, and that the pain that you are experiencing or have experienced is preparing you through a process for what God ultimately has for you. I love you all so much. We'll see you tomorrow for day 4. Grace and peace. Be blessed.